Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the debut album from K, titled My Name is K. Now, as those of you who have been following this series for a while now probably know, I'm Canadian. And what you probably don't know is that Canadian radio and Canadian charts are a little bit different than the charts you'd find in the States. First is that outside of a few acts, hip-hop doesn't really have a huge amount of groundswell on Canadian charts. Well, sure, we get the big names, the ones that are popular everywhere, but not a huge amount outside of that. Secondly, outside of Alberta and Saskatchewan, we didn't normally used to get a lot of country music either, which changed a fair bit recently, thanks to the heavy mainstream push with regards to country music, as I've discussed before, which has some level of mixed results. Thirdly, and most importantly, we have something called the Canadian Radio Television Telecommunications Commission, otherwise known as the CRTC. This government-backed commission is responsible for making sure Canadian content has an actual chance on our radio in the face of American competition. So, in other words, Americans, if you thought you were sick of Nickelback or Justin Bieber, well, you haven't heard anything. But look, if I'm gonna be honest, I actually support the CRTC regulations a fair bit. Mostly because there is a ton of great Canadian content that most people south of the border will never hear thanks to the overwhelming amount of American material. It's just a numbers game and one that we end up losing most of the time. And the fact that bands like Metric and Mariana's Trench can occasionally land some chart success here not only means that rock didn't really go away in Canada, but that the charts maintain some of that genre diversity that can occasionally get lost in the American Billboard Hot 100. Our charts are probably a little bit more analogous to the British charts in that we tend to have a bit more international crossover successes up here, with newer upcoming trends from across the water, and of course we get more chart oddballs that wouldn't chart anywhere else. So, with that in mind, I think I have something of a duty to cover at least some Canadian content that passes by me. So let's talk about the debut album from K. She's a pop hip-hop singer who initially got some viral buzz back in 2011 with her song My Name is K, which is also the title of this album. And she also got a little bit more success courtesy of a collaboration she did with Pusha T last year. She's had some difficulty getting that major breakthrough hit, but hey, she got picked up by Universal, so she must be doing something right. So, with all that in mind, how does her debut album titled My Name is K turn out? Oh, God damn it, I hate doing this. I really wanted My Name is K to be a great album, but the reality is that despite a token few highlights, this record is pretty forgettable. Look, it's not bad and it's not aggressively worth hating, but it definitely shows the seams of a troubled assembly and is yet another album that shows how most of the industry has completely forgotten how to put together a strong pop debut album. So instead of thrashing this album in my usual manner, I'm going to use it as an object lesson to explain how future pop artists might want to structure their albums going forward if they want to have some degree of mainstream success or critical acclaim. So firstly, you need to define what the role of the debut album is. To put forward the new artist and establish the brand. You can save the crazy experimentation for the expansion EP or the follow-up. You need to show with the opening album that what the artist has here doesn't already exist in the mainstream pop scene. And, you know, My Name is K starts off pretty damn well in that regard, opening with a title track that had a distinctly funky edge that I really dug, and it showed that K having some attitude and presence. And if they had stuck with that for the rest of the album, if they had continued in this pattern, instead of only taking it up haphazardly throughout the rest of the record, I suspect I would have enjoyed My Name is K a lot more than I did. But no, very quickly the instrumentation takes a turn for generic Eurodance pop that sounds about 2 years out of date. Sure, there's the occasional touches of modernity with overuse of reverb, but it really squanders the spark of momentum coming off the first few tracks into these just interchangeable dance pop beats that come across as album filler. And on a 10-song debut LP, you don't have room for album filler. And now this takes us to our second point. Make sure that your artist is placed in the best possible light. Kay has a lot of attitude, to be sure, but her voice isn't really as forceful or strident or occasionally obnoxious as Kesha or Miley Cyrus. So she needs to have the support of her instrumentation and production behind her. And here's where we run to the first major issue with this album. What I like to call Calvin Harris production, fusing heavy, fuzz-saturated beats into the instrumentation, and that overwhelms the main vocalist. Granted, it's not quite as bad as some of Calvin Harris's songs like Sweet Nothing, but there are points in the instrumentation where you can tell that the guy who mixed this album considered Kay's voice the least important element. And I could swear that her volume is turned down a couple notches on a few tracks, which is really disappointing. What's worse here is the overproduction. This album is another album where somebody thought it'd be a good idea to overload the songs with unnecessary electronic elements. And while it doesn't sound cheap to its credit, those elements don't really exactly add anything to the mix either, especially not personality or uniqueness. Now, granted, this isn't all of the time. In fact, there are several points on the drop in these songs during the bridge that it's a lot lighter in a mid-90s Eurodance style instead of going for the more modern dubstep trends, and I'll acknowledge that it works well with Kay's upbeat delivery, but there's still more overproduction here than there really should be, particularly considering that it's obscuring some of Kay's personality. And now we reach the third point, and arguably the most important. Establishing personality. Now this is different than creating a brand, because while less discerning individuals will flock to good instrumentation, which will come up anyways as part of the brand, people who love music, and especially critics like myself, will be looking for differentiation points between the debut artist and the rest of her peers that she's going to be competing with. Now, to be fair, it's a debut album, and you're always going to get songs about how said artist made it on a debut album. And I'll give Kay this, there are some distinctly Canadian moments in her music that did put a smile on my face. Every time she referenced anything in Nova Scotia, I couldn't help but grin. But outside of that, man, there's not a lot of lyrical personality here. I mean, Bus Stop brings in Ryan Tedder to bring an exuberant edge to a rather desperate song, which it works well. But then we have Pusha T delivering a whole new level of caustic bitterness in his verses on Strangers that really made the song not particularly nice to listen to. And outside of those, you get a selection of pop tracks that really don't have a lot to them lyrically that makes them stand out. Of course, it doesn't help that nearly every song is jacked up with this heavy thudding dance beat, but there could have been some redemptive moments here to really give Kay some distinctive personality and help her stand out from the crowd. And this album, well, it just doesn't have that. It feels like this album was assembly produced in order just to produce something that would sell, and in reality, without that level of distinctive personality, it's not going to give Kay any staying power, and I think that's the saddest part of it all. So look, in the end, while My Name is Kay is essentially harmless, it's not especially strong either. Yeah, Kay steps up to the plate with a fair amount of energy, and there are some idiosyncratic moments that stand out in a good way, but there isn't enough distinctive character to get me to come back. Mostly thanks to lackluster lyrics and a metric truckload of bad decisions in the mixing booth. If you're looking for album highlights, the title track Bus Stop and Whatever are probably the songs I like the most on this album, but otherwise My Name is Kay doesn't do a lot to impress me or stand out. Then again, it doesn't do a lot to really actively offend me either, and for the most part the dance pop is danceable and never aggressively bad. So with that, it's a 6 out of 10. Look, if you're interested, it's worth a look, because My Name is Kay is passable to be sure. But if you don't care one way or another, it's just another burst of silly dance pop, and you know what? There isn't really anything wrong with that. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's any other albums you'd like me to take a look at, or if there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm more than happy to take a look. Until then, see you next time.